Up next, we've got our BYOC panel. As a reminder, Bring Your Own Cloud is an increasingly popular deployment option for cloud services, giving you the best of a SaaS managed service along with the data sovereignty of all of your compute and data residing in your own cloud environment. Now, I'd like to introduce our panelists. We've got Aashish Kohli, product manager at ClickHouse, the column-oriented DBMS. We've got Arya, Ketan, senior principal engineer at ShareChat, India's largest social media platform. We've got Raghul Nandagopal, VP of Engineering at Dun & Bradstreet, leading business data analytics company. And I'd like to welcome back to the stage Yaroslav Tkachenko. Welcome, everybody. Thank you all for joining us. We're going to spend a little bit of time talking about BYOC, Bring Your Own Cloud. I'm going to kick us off with a question for the panel as a whole. Let's start with, why do BYOC? Why is BYOC such a deployment model, and what are the advantages?
Maybe I can go first in the door. So see, BYOC, right? Like, I think for a lot of companies where people are worried about data sovereignty, for cost, for bringing a lot of computation closer to the data that they have, and a lot of transparency, I think BYOC as a model makes a lot of sense. And at least for me, that's one of the reasons which strikes a chord with me.
Yeah, I can go next. So one of the important factors that we normally consider around data is chain of custody of data, as well as kind of giving accountability to our customers on where the data is stored, how the data is processed, and all those things. So especially with the increased regulatory compliance needs for GDPR and other regulatory rules, we have to make sure that the data is within a perimeter that is controlled, and we have full control over data and its progress through the data supply chain and whatnot. So BYOC helps us to kind of set up that ecosystem without compromising the need for writing out or as in giving up on technology that we need to implement. So BYOC kind of, for example, if we need a Red Panda, it is available in BYOC. That helps us to get the latest and greatest, but still keep the data within our perimeter.
So Tristan, maybe I can jump in on the cost aspect. I think Arya touched on that. I guess BYOC allows customers to lower their total cost of ownership. They can leverage specific infrastructure discounts they might have with the cloud providers. In addition, I think it also allows them to co-locate apps within the same VPC. So that helps minimize the data transfer costs because the apps are within the same VPC. As well as, I think BYOC also allows them to have more predictable performance, as customers can control the configuration of the infrastructure they're using under the hood. It allows them to more closely manage the performance they get from their deployments.
Really hard to add something, all really good points. But I just want to again highlight the cost aspect. I think this is very important for a lot of customers who already negotiated discounts with their cloud providers, and sometimes getting BYOC is just a better from economical standpoint.
Great set of answers. Thank you so much for them. Okay, next question. We hear sometimes people are worried that BYOC might be difficult to implement. And Raghul, I was wondering if you could just talk a little bit about your experiences implementing BYOC with Red Panda.
Yeah, truth be told, yes, it can turn out to be a little bit of a challenge when it comes to getting someone else, in this case Red Panda, kind of aligned to an organization's practices. So there is every single organization has their own set of practices for network security, operations, and whatnot. So that happened to us as well. As in, when Red Panda came in, we said, hey, we are going to give you this VPC with these set of IAM roles and whatnot. And also it's going to be within this subnet, within this, all those kind of rules have been laid out on how the network should look like, how the IAM permissions should look like, and all those things. So once that perimeter is set, then Red Panda had to make some adjustments to kind of make themselves available in that environment. It took some time for us to kind of sort out all those things. So it's definitely a back and forth on, hey, do we really need this control versus hey, this is no go without this control, and all those things. So once that step is cleared, wherein we are able to align on, hey, this organization needs these security controls and whatnot, and then our network considerations. Once that is set up, and then the scripts are all like kind of altered to a certain degree to allow for Red Panda or any of the BYOC providers to operate within that framework, then it's like smooth sailing from there on. But all the pain is in the initial month or two where we are rolling out this option. Different organizations have different set of rules. So somebody would say, hey, you spin up your own VPC and then just fire away. It might be a one-day install versus it took us a couple of months, but it's time worth spending to make sure that we get what we exactly want in terms of security and observability posture.
Yeah, whoever said that networking and security in the cloud was easy, right? I know one of our customers recently, Truecaller, went to production from signing contract to going to production in 9 days on BYOC. So I think there's scope for kind of all answers on this one. Okay, I want to talk a little bit about maintenance, because the benefits of a SaaS product is that you don't need to worry about maintenance. It's taken out of your hands, and but then also, do you need to worry about it? Aashish, I'm wondering if you could just talk about kind of how you see things like how do we scale clusters, and when do you roll bug fixes and version upgrades and that kind of thing?
Sure, Tristan. So I guess first and foremost for ClickHouse Cloud, our goal is to ensure that our customers are not on an unsupported version of our product. The next thing is making sure they are on a stable and most feature-rich version that we can provide to them. And with that, I guess the way we do maintenance, especially for BYOC, customers are typically with BYOC deployment, they're looking for more control over their deployments. So with BYOC, we have this notion of maintenance windows, which allows customers to control when their services are upgraded. They can control both the date and time, so they can control the specific time of day and a day of the week during which their services are upgraded. We also have the notion of what's called a fast channel, which basically means it allows customers to pick specific services as canaries. So they can have multiple services. They can designate certain services to be upgraded first. And with that upgrade, they can test any features that they want to test or any workloads that they want to test on those services before the rest of their services are upgraded. The only caveat I would say there is that if there is a critical security patch that causes their service to be at a critical security risk, we will upgrade those out of band. The thing to keep in mind, though, is our upgrades are rolling restarts. So as long as customers have the right architecture set up where they have the right kind of reconnects to the service from their clients, they shouldn't really be impacted by these upgrades at all. Coming to the topic of autoscaling, that is something else that we pride ourselves on at ClickHouse Cloud. We've basically implemented autoscaling, and we've totally offloaded, or customers can totally offload the burden of right-sizing their service to us based on the CPU and memory load on the service, as well as certain thresholds we have. We will autoscale their service both vertically and horizontally to meet the right needs. And customers still have control where they can turn off autoscaling, and they can have like fine-grained control over how many replicas they want in their service and how big they want each replica to be.
Aashish, thank you. It sounds like you at ClickHouse have a very similar set of maintenance policies that we do at Red Panda. We've got the ability for customers to set their maintenance windows, and I know, Arya, you've changed your maintenance windows recently to just tweak them slightly, but it's something we let the customers do, which is I think super useful.
Yeah, it's something that, I mean, prior to ClickHouse, I was at Confluent, and that's something we struggled with there as well. I think typically it's the customers that are the large enterprise customers or the ones that are going for BYOC that care more about these maintenance windows.
Absolutely, and with Arya's team based in India, they have different important times of the day than we do in the rest of the world. So it's important that we give customers the ability to choose that. Arya, I wanted to come to you next on cost savings. I know that was one of the big reasons that you chose Red Panda. And what can you tell us about the kind of cost savings aspect of BYOC?
Yeah, I think even in to start with, like a lot of us were talking about why for BYOC cost plays a very significant point of contention, right? So I think, see, from my point of view, why is cost important and cost savings that we can expect from BYOC? I think what we want as customers is basically a transparency, right? Maybe the solution to be able to enable cost efficiency as one of the key outcomes of setting up the cluster. Scalability, because the load can come down, up and down basis your usage patterns, your traffic. And finally, ecosystem efficiency. Now, if you really think about it, how BYOC really helps with all of these is because when we are paying for the cost, we are not paying for some ubiquitous metric like GBPS. And see, otherwise what happens is that most of the companies starts trying to optimize their load patterns. Either they will remove usages, or they'll try to optimize the hell out of a metric which is basically some throughput metric. But that is because when we say, for example, hop on to a vendor whose cost is built on a throughput measurement, right? Then we don't know actually what their how transparent that cost is, like what actually they are incurring in infrastructure versus the licensing versus, right? So it becomes really a non-transparent conversation. Versus in a BYOC model, I, for example, know what my infrastructure cost looks like. And then, as someone was mentioning, that because I may be a large customer with my cloud vendor, so I may have very dedicated cost which could really be low, right? Hence, with on cost savings, I think it becomes very reasonable to and have a very objective lens on what actually the cost would look like from a usage perspective. Now, I think as a customer or as a Kafka ecosystem user, I could be on Kafka OSs, I could be on Red Panda OSs, or Confluent Cloud, or Red Panda BYOC. But I think Red Panda BYOC in a way has been trendsetters for lowering the TCO of the customers. For example, the way they did the pricing, the way they came up with solutions which really helped us lower the cost, and probably like many other customers across the globe, really kind of became a trendsetter. And then WebStream have solved a very pertinent problem. And I think now, because Red Panda was kind of a trendsetter, like companies like Confluent are also catching up, understanding that, hey, BYOC is going to be a reality, and people are and especially like customers who are very cost conscious and want to have a lower TCO will probably go for such a model than over the traditional cloud one. So there is a model for everyone, but I think BYOC typically helps a lot. And the ecosystem around it, right? Like you bring in cloud topics, Iceberg, Connect, so you're lowering the cost of the ecosystem around the core problem statement that the messaging system started with.
And I just like to add something, because cost is such a painful topic for many of us. What some people don't realize is in the cloud environment, multi-tenancy is very important, and it's frequently reflected in pricing structure. And it's just what Arya said about billing for throughput. I've had a very painful experience with one of the cloud offerings where, because they looked at throughput, the single number is not just enough, and they had to look at 6 different metrics. And if you over of any of these 6 metrics, you basically go over to the next tier, right? And so it's just because in this highly multi-tenant environments, you really need to charge for a certain baseline, right? You got to think about all these different dimensions when it comes to cost. And of course, in the BYOC environment, you control it more yourself, and the expectations are very different, and you can sort of tune that workload to the model that works for you, not the average sort of baseline model that the cloud offering has.
We've just had a question in from the audience. John Carew is, I hope I pronounced your name right, is asking, is there a way to determine the max cost risk per hour across all the different offerings? For example, knowing the cost of not throttling. And I think you were sort of covering that in your answer. Do you want to just double click on that one a little bit?
Yeah, I think if I understand the question correctly, and Tristan, probably correct me if my understanding is wrong. I think if the question is that, is there a way to determine the cost risk? Now, I think the way I'm understanding cost risk is that what could be the increase in cost that can certainly come in because of sudden increase in the throughput, right, across all the different offerings like BYOC versus say throughput based build, right? I think my understanding is that because most of the systems are not able to predict the throughput in advance, like for example suddenly a bunch of user starts coming onto your platform, your throughput can just double, triple to whatever the additional throughput is, right? And therefore that's already cost incurred, right? Because then you cannot that's already your cost you have paid, even though you may not be in a ready to pay be in a position to pay that cost. Versus in a BYOC setup, right, you have you start with a you don't start with a throughput based measurement, right? Because you size up your cluster to handle certain load, right? And therefore the cost kind of becomes static in a way. Now the cluster can potentially take up more load, like it can go double the throughput and then maybe come down, but your bill does not go up immediately. Only if there is a sustained increase, then it becomes a planned activity. So I think that's a very, very basic difference between a throughput based billing versus this kind of modeling where the cost therefore is under your control, and if it is only a spiky momentary thing, then it's kind of absorbed.
Yep. I know we work with you closely for your peak events of the year like Diwali and New Year, and we sort of see the throughput go up during those times. I guess the good thing with BYOC is, right, the data is in your network at that point. So you've had customer data come in and you kind of pay the cost for that. But once it's in your network, you talk to a BYOC cluster, you're not paying additional network charges because it's already in your VPC. So you're not seeing that. Whereas if you're going to an external SaaS, you've got to exit your network back in again. It's like this, and then there's throughput charges on top of that. Cool. Thank you. I want to...
Sorry, if I may jump in, I think just to add to the cost discussion, I think it also sort of goes into the scaling aspects. If you have auto scaling turned on as a customer, you will expand the capacity of your service as more load comes on the service. So we've seen sort of customers who are cost conscious who will just pin their service and not have auto scaling turned on. And we have performance sensitive customers who will rely on auto scaling. They worry less about cost. They just want to make sure the capacity is there when it's needed.
I love that feature. I think that's awesome. It gives you've got the best of all worlds at that point. You can auto scale or you can pin for cost. That's ideal. I know there's a few different approaches to BYOC. I think Red Panda was one of the first to market, if not the first to market, with a BYOC model. Yaroslav, you've I think evaluated a few different approaches as you've been around. I'd love to hear kind of your thoughts on different approaches to BYOC.
Definitely. Another approach that I've seen some new companies are using is you really separate the metadata from data, right? And you use your cloud storage, your object storage like S3 as your primary storage. So that means that this interface is very, very simple, right? It's very easy to set up auth, and the metadata is essentially moved outside of your VPC. So it's still managed in some kind of central way by the vendor who provides the service, right? But as a result, because you split your metadata from your data, the workloads that you deploy, let's say in your private VPC, they can become literally stateless, right? They talk to S3, they maybe, do reads and writes and whatever's additional, operations, but they become truly stateless, right? Which means it's very easy to auto scale. It's very easy to manage them. You can do rolling deployments any time of the day. You don't need to schedule any maintenance, anything like that. But as a result, because you're moving metadata outside of your account, essentially it's still sitting on the vendor side. It is also a point of failure, right? So it's a compromise between yes, your actual data, which could be extremely valuable and something you want to protect, is sitting in your VPC, so the vendor doesn't have access to the data, but you still depend on that sort of endpoint for the metadata access. And so it's not going to work probably for all the use cases out there, right? Some companies truly need full control over this, but maybe for smaller startups and companies who are not as yet bound by all these regulations, it is a very feasible option as well, and it just becomes so easy to manage because again, you're just dealing with a deployment of stateless workers, and I've used it for quite a while, and even with a small team, it's quite easy to manage.
Yeah, really interesting to hear different approaches. I've often said that if Red Panda sort of disappeared from the face of the earth, all the Red Panda clusters, like BYOC clusters out there, would keep running because it's a complete isolated model. Whereas I think other models kind of have more real-time links back to HQ for metadata. Everybody, we are at time. Thank you so much for joining. I really appreciate your time on here.